hot, bold, sweet, smooth, and always flavorful. Welcome to my morning coffee. 3 generations of successful women, brewed with black girl magic, and French press with class, sass, and style. Gia, Tonya, and Sarita are my morning coffee.
All right. Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of My Morning Coffee, where the conversation is always hot, bold, and full of flavor. And this morning, we have the amazing Tom Soto with us. It's very timely that we have him based on the things that we are going through as a country, people of color, living in a time where environmental justice is incredibly important and so many other issues nationwide and particularly here in California. So let's go ahead and get started with what's in your cup. Let's start with Gia this morning and find out, Ms. Gia, what are you drinking and what have you been up to? What's going on with you?
Good morning. I have coffee in my cup. I need it. I need something else, but I'm tired. So I'm going to start with coffee. I haven't been up to much lately. This past weekend was our sororities convention, national convention, which we usually have in July. But due to COVID, we wasn't able to have it in July, and it's our centennial year. So we had our first virtual convention this past weekend. Something new for us as a sorority during this COVID time, and it was long, but conventions are always long, but normally they stretched over a few days, but we had to do everything. We're trying to get everything done within 2 days. So just imagine me, Tonya, at a computer all day from 700 hours to almost 7 p.m. So I am like tired. Yes, very tired. But so that was my weekend.
Was the technology that you guys were using able to keep up with the amount of voting and due diligence that you guys had going on? Because I missed it.
Yeah, well, I'm not a techie person, not real techie, but this was my first experience in doing a convention like this and having to do a voting thing. We've been Zooming for a while, so that part wasn't too difficult. It's just the voting. We used a company called Big Post that did the voting for us. So, and I think it was a little learning curve for everybody because this was our first time doing it. So once everybody I think got the hang of it, when it was time to vote, you go here and do that. It started to, kind of feel a little bit better. But I think in the beginning, I think at least I know I was, and I was talking to our chapter because we had a group meet, and I said, this is stressful for an old person. Because we had to have 2 devices and switching back and forth. And, my job, I don't, most people that have, regular jobs or office jobs, they're probably used to that stuff, being at a computer all day with multiple screens and clicking here, clicking there. But, my profession here, what I do, we have computers, but they're not really used the same way other people use them in their business. So ours is more to receive information, and then either we have to go somewhere and do something, things like that. So I'm not that savvy when it comes to switching back and forth. So I was frustrated. I was mad too because I was like, I couldn't have Jeff help me because it's our convention, so I had to be by myself. So I'm trying to figure this stuff out. So I was stressed, and I didn't have any alcohol during this whole time. So I was dry. Which I needed to be, so just saying, but I wanted to drink.
Which tells us what's in your coffee
But I
cup.
think if I would have had a drink, I would have probably fell asleep. Yeah, so after this morning, I'm gonna have a drink today.
Cheers. Let me in on
So,
that.
yeah, but other than that, so
Good. Good to
that
hear.
was my weekend.
Good to hear it. So Tom, as excited as I am to hear all of what you've been up to, let's start with what's in your cup. What is in your cup this morning?
This is my semi-weekly. I don't do this every day, but I get it probably 3 days a week. It's a 2% latte grande from Starbucks. And it definitely helps get me going. And usually one of those days is Monday. So, but simply a grande latte from Starbucks.
With nothing else in it. No Irish coffee. That's not an Irish coffee.
No, just 2% milk,
So as busy as your life is, what is Mondays like for you? Are you, full speed ahead 7 days a week? Or is Monday the start of, what you have going on for the week?
It's definitely the beginning of a rhythm. But I think the COVID lifestyle is that, given the need to bat down the hatches, shelter in place and so forth, we've all come to feel as though that maybe each day of the week has kind of mushed into, one day to the next. And, I really make an effort to draw a definition between the work week and the weekend.
Okay.
That's not to say that I'm not working on the weekend, but that's when I'm available for my son, for my husband, or for more social activity, just to kind of rejuvenate the soul and keep it going. That's not to say I don't enjoy what I do during the week, but it gets a little monotonous, right? And you need to give some variety to life in order to restore your spirit a little bit. And maybe even now and then, once a month or however often one can afford to do so, is to get out of town. And our location du jour seems to be these days Mammoth Lakes, because it's accessible. We could go. Usually you spend a lot of time in Maui, but that's been cut off from us. And so we've probably been to Mammoth Lakes this summer 4 or 5 times, gone fishing, actually caught some fish. I mean, it's been very enjoyable. But, I think it's important to really focus on family during the weekends. Thankfully, we live near the beach, so we're able to take Jonah and some of his, 1 or 2 of his friends on play dates to the beach.
Yeah.
And that helps up. So, it takes a little bit more focus to stay off the iPad or the iPhone, read a book, break away from all the negative that's out there. And then Monday morning, I put my feet on the floor, discharge all the negative crap that comes out of all the media and focus on what needs to get done, which is taking care of my family, taking care of my business, ensuring that I'm staying in touch with my friends and contacts and people who I care about and who care for us, and move forward.
Well, speaking of everything that's going on in the news and in the world, I want to give you the opportunity to let our viewers know who you are and what you do that affect what's going on in our society right now. So let's get into the election. Let's get into some of the problems, because what I love about you, Tom, is that you are a problem solver. You are all about solutions, and everything that you have done in your career is very solutions oriented. So if you don't mind, go ahead and let the viewers know who you are and what you do, how you bring solutions.
Tom,
what's going on
Tom,
now?
Before you get into what you do,
Don't do it.
Tonya's good. She thinks she's slick. You know how she wanted to go around the room and ask us all what's in our cup, and then she wants you to dove into, why you're here. We do want to hear why you're here, because, you have a lot of information and you're doing a lot of big things out there. But before you go into that, we need to find out what's in Tonya's cup and what she been up to.
That's a good question, Tonya. What is in that cup?
Definitely not what I want in the cup, okay? It's just coffee this morning. I'm incredibly tired. We have baseball all weekend. I have to tell you, it's exciting to be able to see kids be able to be kids sometimes. So
Right.
even with COVID, the travel leagues have found a way to safely make it happen. None of our kids have been exposed. We've been traveling over the last month. We've been back at it. Ray took my 12-year-old to Arizona recently.
Wow.
And yeah, but they still have very high standards. So coffee is in my cup because we had a long day at the park. But the important part about that is something that we've realized in regards to this COVID situation is, we talked about how things are in Arizona, and he said they have strict rules, but they abide by them. There's no one really out there protesting the rules. So they're able to function in a way that makes sense, and people can continue to go about their business and have some level of pleasure, some level of normalcy with security in place. He said you go in the restaurants and people have on their masks, and they, as you go through the city, they have on their masks and they do their thing. Things have changed a little bit. So with baseball, the boys aren't high-fiving, or after the game, the line where they shake hands, it's kind of a tilt your hat out of respect type of thing. So they've changed the way they do things, but still giving them the opportunity to do them. And what I enjoy about that is no one's protesting, right? It's like, we're being safe. We're so that we can continue to do this, because the moment they don't follow the rules, then they stop. They can't do it anymore. Right. At this point, I enjoy watching the kids and their parents, all of us, follow the rules so that we can continue to do that, in the hopes that the rest of California will continue to abide by that, right? We want to open up, but we want to do it safely. Clearly, what has happened this weekend is a great example of what not following the rules and not being safe looks like. So we definitely want to stay away from that. And kids are what's important. That's my heart. Not just my kids, but other people's kids, and being able to see them do their thing is important. So coffee's in my cup this morning. I don't know, about 5 o'clock, I have a board meeting. By the time I'm done with that, who knows? But at this point, coffee, and I'm trying to keep up with everything else that's going on in hopes that, like Tom, I can be a part of the solution. So yes. So now let's get back to Tom.
How was that, Gene? Is that okay?
Yes.
Well, I hear you. I mean, it is just, when I think it was March 13th when Gavin Newsom sent out his executive order, and the following week, shelter in place became more and more of a term throughout our country, and more of an action item, and and in this household as well. And I wondered midweek, the following week, God, what are we going to do? And, I thought that there would be a considerably more amount of time to ponder all of this, and it's actually gotten more busy. And, and it's not just busy with the things that we have on our traditional plate, i.e. work and our projects, but more, the spiritual consumption of, how is my community? How are my neighbors? Who are my neighbors?
Right.
What's going on with my parish community? Gosh, we can't go to church anymore. I have to live stream Mass and do a drive-by to pick up communion and the Eucharist. And, so there's some adjustments that have occurred. And, human nature is really used to driving life along certain types of patterns. And when those patterns are disrupted, we have to make sure that we're aware of those disruptions so that we could accommodate them spiritually and know that they could be absorbed, overcome, and we can move forward. And I think this is a huge national and global trauma that we're experiencing now that we have to be very mindful of and very aware of. And the best way to deal with it, to me, is by slowing down, breathing, meeting it with huge amounts of gratitude and mercy for others, and then pursuing the type of agenda and course that will not only keep my family above it all, but others as well to the extent possible. And, that's a challenge, but, it's also, spiritually rewarding to know that, you could contribute even in times as challenging as the ones that we're experiencing now. So, congratulations on having the endurance, for example, to stick with your kids' baseball schedule. That's no small feat. And it kind of, goes to the effect when, I have one kid. So I admire anybody that has more than one. And then I look at my parents who had 6 kids, 2 dogs and a turtle named Charlie, that they had to care for, all in a 3-bedroom home, and yet their success was extraordinary. It was great community wealth. It was great spiritual and family wealth. It may not have been fantastic financial wealth, but the mark that they left on the state, with my father being the first Latino elected to the state legislature, my mother serving the last 10 years of her life in the state Senate, and creating change and improvement for the communities that we all serve, to me, that's invaluable. And here we are with a great challenge called a pandemic. And it's forcing folks like the 3 of us and many, many more to step up to the plate for our communities and our families to make sure that we get past this. This too shall pass, and we will move forward because it's who we are. This is what Americans do. We innovate our way into greater times. And Gia, Tonya, I know that both of you are innovators. Tonya, I know you're married to another innovator, and we're all part of a community that is seeking innovation. We're not 9-to-5ers. There's not even a time clock in our life. It's always, just pursuing the greatest solution for the challenges that we're experiencing, especially right now. So, all of that said, maybe we should all pat ourselves on the back and say, thank God we've gotten this far. We've got a little bit further to go. There's going to be some changes in November, whether there's a change in administration or not. There has to be a change in November and January in terms of the tone and the type of leadership that is being given to the American people in order to assure an economic recovery and a solution to the pandemic, whether it's medical, whether it's education. There has to be something that's more meaningful out there that we as an American people can focus on and help to turn opinion, optimism, courage, as well as markets to accept these changes and know that as we move forward, things may be a little bit different than they were 10 months ago.
Tom, talk to us about how we get people of color to understand the importance of this moment and the role that they play in it. What is your thought process and how to affect change in maybe a stagnant mindset?
Well, it's not only it's a stagnant mindset because it's an exhaustive mindset. I really enjoy this conversation that we're in that was really existing, as you know, before BLM and before the murder of George Floyd. What that did is it helped to crystallize it even further and create a more precise demand on that conversation for results. But, if you're old enough to remember, there was a term called affirmative action, which called on agencies and government to have standards that included assuring a certain percentage of whatever, admissions to the UC system or Cal State or job applicants, that a percentage be people of color, diverse, women. those were called quotas. And somewhere along the line, the term quota became demonized and became a stigma. So the voters in California, for example, actually took away affirmative action in 1996 under Prop 209, and we now have a proposition to repeal that on the California ballot this November, next month. And, you know, it basically goes to reconstituting affirmative action in the state of California, because the numbers on minority participation and giving access to them for opportunity has really dropped, especially when you look at admissions to some of the more highly qualified UC schools, UC Berkeley, UCLA, and so forth. And, you know, I think if, with respect to your question, how do we open up the eyes? We want to change that. We want in this case, 16 to be approved and supported by Californians so that we could have affirmative action and encourage minority participation in government contracts, in hiring, in admissions to schools, and so forth. You know, in business, as we all know, you know, when your division sets a goal, you have to understand what is your current market and what is the benchmark on sales or performance that you want. And if you don't meet that, then you come up with a plan to achieve that standard. And that's called a quota. That's a benchmark in performance. And if you don't meet it over once or twice or three times, you may be gone, but you're going to meet it. The same is true here, that, you know, maybe we've tried everything else. Maybe we go back to quotas and say, you know what, let's just have a minimum number, because we've done everything else in the past. We've been given empty promises for decades now, and nothing has occurred. I mean, right now, you know, there was AB 979 that was recently signed by Governor Newsom, which calls on California-based public companies to have at least one member of its board of directors be diverse. That's not occurring because it's been a voluntary effort by corporate America. It's occurring because they have willingly ignored this cause and this plea to have more diverse participation in the C-suite and the boardroom. Why? I don't know. But we do know this: when there are more women and people of color on a corporate board, that board is going to perform better. We know that when there's 3 people of color and women on the board, it performs like 35% more profitably. So there are reasons from the shareholder point of view why we want this. Thus, CalPERS and CalSTRS, our public pensions, calling on these public companies that they own a huge piece of, to have diverse board members and diverse members in the C-suite, because they view it as a returns strategy. It helps to improve shareholder value and so forth. So, you know, I think it goes back to your original question. What is it that folks could do? You know, honestly, vote. Let's get affirmative action back in place. Vote. Let's, you know, have a federal government that embraces diversity and sees it for what it is. It is the nutritional, spiritual base of what's made our country great. You know, today is the anniversary of Steve Jobs passing. And why is that significant? You know, because I think we're all in recognition of what immigrants and children of immigrants do to contribute to the growth of the U.S. economy. And ultimately, he may not have been well known as the son of an immigrant, but he was adopted and was, in fact. And same true with Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. You know, these are folks that, you know, are the Horatio Algers of their day and have made a meaningful difference, and quite frankly, you know, have made California, or contributed to California becoming the 5th largest economy on the planet, with a legislature that has a considerable amount of Black and Latino caucus members in its state legislature that control the resources that go into that economy. So you can't tell me that minority participation dilutes value. Indeed, as the Black caucus and the Latino caucus grew in the state of California within our legislature, so too did the economics and the growth and the scale of our economy on the world stage.
But Tom, with all what you're saying, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think too, the problem with some of this stuff, like you said, when affirmative action was here, they put such a negative connotation on it, it's like you said about quota. So it still made you feel as though, you got the job. Well, then you start making people feel, people of color, and women, oh, well, you only got it because they had to fill a quota. You're still less than. That's how they made you feel. It's like, oh, oh no, you're not as smart. You're really not that smart. We just had to give you this position because we're told to. And I don't understand why they put such a negative spin on things like that, because affirmative action, those kind of things are needed. I do agree when there's more diversity in anything, you do get more participation. Just like if you think about, if you go back in class, I go back to college when I went to college, I'm on the campus of CSUN. Okay, when some of the classes, it's only 1 or 2 minorities in the class, and the 1 or 2 minorities in the class are you're almost like, we don't want to engage because it's only 2 of us, as opposed to when I went to a class and I saw more diversity, or you see more diversity, you're more willing to participate in what's going on. When it's more diverse, because you look around and say, oh, people that here, they look like me, are they, we have some of the same values and stuff. We're the same, and so to speak. So we get more comfortable, more relaxed, and we're more willing to engage. But again, when you go somewhere, like you go, and you're trying to get on a board somewhere, and look around, it's a bunch of white men. And the first thing you say is, I don't have a chance here, stuff, because, there's nobody that looks like me, that can relate to me, or understand me or anything like that. So you kind of like, oh, well, I don't really know. And we do need that. And like this Proposition 16, I don't know how many voters, how many of us minorities or people of color are aware that Prop 16 is on the ballot. And that's the thing. Everybody's so busy about talking about the negative stuff that's going on in California, around the world, right, instead of talking about things like this, because, hey, that's something we need to know. We need to research it and understand what this proposition is to get it moved, to get it passed. But again, we're so concerned about, all the negativity, and we want to keep talking about that and keep talking about that instead of talking about something positive that can actually benefit all of us.
Well, I would agree, but it's interesting that you said that, because I remember, you're just here because you're Latino. Mm-hmm. Well, affirmative action went away, and guess what? They still say that.
Right, exactly.
So it's racism is incredibly resilient. If our currency was as resilient, all of us would be billionaires. Right. And it's just something that you and I, Tonya, we all live with. And, it's our cross of gold to change, and I'm willing to do it. My parents have done it, and I know that there's a material effect when you provide leadership on questions like this, and it actually translates and converts into good things. 20 years ago, when we founded the New America Alliance, which is our national Latino business initiative, if you could believe this, my mentor in private equity was Danny Villanueva. You can go to my LinkedIn post. I put something up on him yesterday because the LA Rams recognized him. He was a place kicker for the LA Rams, first Latino in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But he went on to an extraordinary career as an American businessman. And he was a legendary visionary on Spanish media. He founded Univision and sold that, and took the proceeds from that sale to take Telemundo out of bankruptcy, and then sold it 5 years later for $2.7 billion. But he was the guy in that space. That's who he was. And he was my mentor. I worked for him for many years. But there was a time where we actually went to CalPERS and CalSTRS and couldn't get a meeting, even with his track record. And it was due to that and the more global, institutional bias, where a lot of Black and Latino funds were just not being given the time of day, much less any type of opportunity. And that was with public pension funds, which, by the way, most of the contributors to those pension funds look like people on this Zoom call, right?
Right.
And
I'm one of them.
You're LA County Sheriff, you're LaSarah, right?
Yes.
But back in those days, now, by sheer coincidence, when we founded NAA in 2000, there were 13 members, and between those members, maybe $300 million in assets under management. And in 2001, my mother, Tom Soto, was elected to the state Senate and became the chair of the Senate Oversight Committee on Public Employees Retirement Systems. And the pensions are paid out of the general fund, not from proceeds. And so they're under the jurisdiction of the state legislature. And when she found out that, one of the pensions, I think it was CalSTRS, had no Latino-owned funds at all, managing its billions of dollars, there was a hearing. When there was no diversity program, she had a hearing. And she was an absolute bull when it came to ensuring that there was equal access to opportunity, and held up their budgets until a diversity and inclusion program was submitted that she would be able to support regarding minority participation in fund management. And that was called the Emerging Manager Program. Wow. Long story less long, after several hearings, they went ahead and did it. That program succeeded. And we took that legislative remedy and we applied it in New Mexico and Illinois and New York and other states. And by 2015, the NAA had 90 members and $85 billion of assets under management between them. So that works. You have to use the legislative solution and as a remedy to move folks forward. And that gave rise to really excellent funds that are now doing very well, not by just themselves, but by the pensioners of California, New York, and Illinois. Palladium Equity Partners is probably $8 or $9 billion. Clear Lake, I think, is somewhere over $20 billion. That was the beginning of Magic Johnson Enterprises, who was a huge partner with CalPERS in real estate and did very well. So it had nothing to do with merit. It was simply being given the opportunity to get that exposure and being given equal access and allowed in the door of opportunity and so forth. And that story is true all over when it comes to financial management, when it comes to elected, being given the right to run for office and actually get there. It means going for district elections instead of at-large elections where Black and Latino votes are split and districts are decentralized. But it also goes for finance. It goes for board seats and C-suites as well, which is why it's so important that AB 979 was signed into law, because it basically is a stake in the sand that this governor is putting out there saying, will this be tested and tried in court? Likely, but worth it. And we're going to prove that the last frontier of civil rights is access to opportunity, financial opportunity, C-suites, and board membership. And we need to gain that right and demonstrate what we could do in order to show that these public companies can perform better. They're certainly making profits off the back of our communities. Why not, Chipotle, Del Taco, and El Pollo Loco. What does that ring into your head? That's kind of like, well, if I were Del Taco, wouldn't I have a Latino on my board? Mm-hmm. No, they don't. Neither does El Pollo Loco, neither does Chipotle. Maybe it's time that they did, right? And so and it does, you know, and I think that this whole question of diversity is colorblind. You know, I think it's women, gay and lesbian, Latino, Black, Asian. You know, it just needs to be sensitized and pulled out of the, you know, the locker room and put onto the platform out in the parking lot and say, okay, who's the best, most competitive? Well, you look at our markets, you know, the Latino market is $2.7 trillion. We're 26% of GDP here in the United States. We're 18% of the population and only 2% of the Russell 1000 board members.
Wow.
And, you know, these are statistics, and it's probably not any better for the Black community, you know, and we should be compelling through legislative remedy, because they don't listen to the market. They don't listen to opinions. They only listen when you put a regulatory driver down their throat and say, you're going to do this. And so we need a president that will do that. We need a governor, and this governor is doing that. So, you know, when you ask, you know, what could be done, get out and vote, you know, vote for Prop 16, vote for affirmative action, vote for a candidate that has embraced diversity and has a diverse team on the campaign, you know, and challenge your colleagues to, in your professional network, to be sensitive that when you're hiring, when you're bringing on a board member, when you're looking for an executive, that you look for someone that looks like the market you're catering to.
Tom, what do you think about, with all that wonderful information that you shared with us, Wells Fargo CEO and his comment about there being a lack of talent in the African-American pool of opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real unfortunate, you know, not just statement, but impression that he has, because the amount of resources that he controls as CEO, you know, will then reflect that attitude, right?
Right.
And, you know, with organizations like that, they're called bureaucracies, which kind of just means that, you know, everyone follows the leader, and ultimately they could be lemmings. And the question is, if someone raises their hand and says, hey, maybe we should have a person of color, what happens to that opinion?
Right.
And so you have to be safe in knowing that if you promote the idea of diversity, you won't be shown the door. And that comment is, I thought, a comment that was relegated to the past. How many times have we heard that? Well, you know, we simply just couldn't find any Black or Latino candidates that were qualified. Wow, really? I mean, after all we've done, we've had a Black president. You know, I mean, I think we're past that. How about going out and, you know, there's the theory of the Rooney Rule, right? You know, that, you know, among any candidate and 3 candidates, one of them will be diverse. And, you know, I like that theory, but, you know, train the people who are implementing the Rooney Rule to appreciate diversity first. You know, when I see this president calling on the federal government to eliminate sensitivity training, and that's racism, and so, are you kidding? You know, that's the key to getting the Small Business Administration sensitized to the needs of low-income diverse communities, for, you know, deploying the resources that they have to make our communities better and give us access to opportunity. I mean, when I was a kid, and I mean, Tonya, you know me well, I'm an environmentalist to the bone, right? I'm a hiker and a climber and a fisher, but, you know, when I was a kid, I didn't see rangers that looked like me.
Right.
Now I do. They look like you, and they're Asian and so forth. And that's because of sensitivity training. And we have somebody in the White House who has demonized that as a racist tactic. You know, that's where we're at in this world, you know, and in our country. And it's a real shame. And it really comes down to, you know, maybe 2 or 3 key states: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, maybe Ohio. You know, 270 electoral college votes. And those 3 states, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, for the past electoral 6 cycles have gone Democrat, except the last one where they barely went for the incumbent in the last cycle. And each of them have Democratic governors, right? So those could be brought back. And, if so, we could move forward in this country instead of, wallowing in this filth that has been generated as a result of this extremely inadequate leadership that has gone to the deaths of over 200,000 people. Where did we go wrong? And in an era where my parents gave huge, meaningful sacrifice. My father was a bombardier, World War II in the South Pacific. My mother worked in a box factory packaging parachutes for soldiers. They lived through the Great Depression when we were spending 5.5% of our national budget to get a man safely on the moon and back before the end of the 1960s. No one complained. They all embraced that, and we did it. And that gave us a huge technological leap that improved the quality of life and the position and stature of our country. And that we could be doing right now, not just by finding a vaccine, but galvanizing support to support one another and love and build upon the communities that we're all serving to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible until a vaccine comes out, that the economy is more resilient than this incumbent has discouraged, and that our global stature as an international leader in helping to lead a global effort, a global Manhattan Project to find a cure and a vaccine instead of dividing everything. Well, you want to change?
There you go.
Fill out that ballot and stick it in the mailbox and, hope and pray that, we don't get the post office closed. And if you want to avoid that, just take it to a polling place and drop it off there.
Man,
but you cannot vote.
Did you see in Texas, in the counties, they are having only one drop-off box for the county? Like, I'm from the Bay Area, and I can't imagine having
counties larger than New Hampshire.
I can't imagine having one drop-off box in Santa Clara County. Like, that would really dissuade me from even bothering. But I wanted to ask you, Tom, your parents were in politics. You're in finance. Why didn't you just do what they did? Because you know so much and you have an amazing way of conveying the important things, which I think a lot of politicians get wrong, right? They're not really strong communicators all the time to communicate to their constituents why what they're doing is important. And you have a way of doing that. I think that's why you're able to build your business and do the things that you do. But why not politics and why finance for you?
I get asked that question a lot. What many people don't know is that I do have a little bit of a political career, which is I enjoy being appointed. I'm really good, as you suggested, thank you very much for your kind words, at looking at situations and finding solutions. So it's not unusual for a governor or a president to ask if I could help with a particular task. In 1993, I don't know. I probably could have gone to work for the administration full time. I may have been able to run for public office, but I was having an extraordinary good time and effective time as an environmental justice activist. And I think I probably may have gotten more accomplished as a part-time presidential appointee, which ultimately I was. I helped to set up the North American Development Bank for the NAFTA, but I did a lot more and advised the president and vice president on green jobs, sustainability, climate change in its early days of this conversation, because Al Gore was president and Earth in the Balance was a huge conversation piece at that point in time. But it was also a point in time where, as we're discussing now about the rise and the need for people of color in finance and business, back then my position was the need for people of color in the environmental movement, because it was our communities that were suffering the brunt of environmental racism. It was our communities that had the landfills. the rail yards, the freeways, the toxic and hazardous waste facilities, the incinerators. And, you know, it was then that I was helping to lead some of the campaigns against the East LA prison, the Lancer incinerator, you know, on and on. I mean, it was just like, really, are you going to continue to shove this stuff down our throat? And that gave rise to a generation of elected officials like Mark Ridley Thomas, who's been a fantastic city council member, assembly member, now county supervisor, and Gloria Molina, who came out of that era as well. But public health improved too. With my leadership and the Coalition for Clean Air's leadership, we were able to change the world with respect to air quality policy. And we did it without sacrificing jobs. We did it while improving the economy. We did it because we knew that if we continued to go down the path of 100% fossil fuels, that we were going to continue to see a deterioration of public health within our communities. Just think, the one lawsuit that the Coalition for Clean Air had while I was president, it went to the Supreme Court. And that basically said that in the case of severe non-attainment, you need a severe solution. And therefore, local standards and state standards preempt federal standards. Federal standards being 3 times less onerous than local air quality standards. We were in violation of the Clean Air Act 180 days a year when we filed that lawsuit. Wow. Currently, we're probably in violation 40 or 50 days, but that gave us the right to design zero and low emission vehicle standards for electric and natural gas vehicles. It helped us to design standards to reform the types of equipment that refineries and manufacturing have so that we could get cleaner air in shorter amount of time. But just one significant thing that, you know, I did, and that was, you know, I got the environmental community to back the Coalition for Clean Air to get the LA County MTA to remove diesel from its procurement policy in 1993. In 1993, they put out an RFP for 360 diesel buses. We took our lawsuit and told the MTA, this is in violation of the Supreme Court Ninth Circuit Court decision. They didn't agree. They ultimately agreed through a lot of political pressure. Thank you, Antonio Villaraigosa, who was a very obscure board member at the time, soon went on to become mayor, of course, and speaker. But because of his leadership and others, Yvonne Burke, we were able to remove diesel from the procurement policy of the MTA. And guess what? A year later, we probably had 70 or 80 other cities doing the same thing. 20 years later, we are pushing a button, crushing the last of 1,700 diesel buses at the MTA, and all of them are now natural gas and electric buses. And virtually every city in the country is doing the same thing. And now you're hard pressed to find a diesel bus at all. Every diesel bus contributed 3 tons of oxides of nitrogen to the community, 1 ton of soot. That was a huge public health benefit and a huge economic development opportunity by giving the OEMs, Detroit, a new manufacturing demand, which is alternative fuel buses. And now we have electric vehicles, we have residential solar, we have wind power, we have storage. We have a standard that by 2045, this governor has said that we're going to have no internal combustion engines sold in the state of California. And right now, almost 4% of our vehicles are electric vehicles. So that one litigation, that changed the world. And it helped create hundreds of thousands of jobs in California. We have 500,000 people that go to work every day, building, maintaining, managing renewable power, electric storage, and EV technology. And guess what? A lot of them look like us. This is a great opportunity for our communities, and it's helping to ensure that our children and their children have cleaner air, a better climate than we had when we were growing up. This 4-year period is disrupting all of that progress because we have a Jurassic thinking executive who has essentially been bought and owned by the fossil fuel industry and is willing to do anything it takes to stay in office, including voter suppression and maybe fraud. So
I would like to ask you though, listening to what you're saying, it almost sounds like you know, they've been using environmental justice and some of the environmental changes that need to take place as something that would kill jobs. They are trying to make it seem like it would kill jobs. But from what you're saying, it actually sounds like not only would it create jobs, but then it creates jobs and wealth for people that look like us. So I hate to go there, but it almost sounds like there's an opportunity for us to do better, even though someone put out a platinum plan that said, oh, I'm putting together this plan for y'all, but you're talking about something that's good for the earth and good for us, and it's still being sold as something that's damaging to the economy. Well,
it does. I mean, unfortunately, but you know, those voices are becoming more and more diluted because folks who look like us are becoming more powerful, not just within the environmental movement, but in state legislatures and Congress and so forth. I mean, when we could get somebody like Maxine Waters, who, you know, not only is iconic as a civil rights leader, but challenges the financial community to diversify itself. But she's also challenged, you know, she threw into the CARE Act in the airline bailout that they need to commit a certain number of the resources she's giving them to climate sensitive air carriers, to zero emission planes. And there's an electric plane industry here in California that is growing and will soon be robust. When people were laughing at me, you know, 15, 20 years ago, driving a Toyota RAV4 electric vehicle, saying, what a weirdo, you know, what's that gonna do? Well, guess what? 20 years later, I'm on my third Tesla, and, you know, there's others, you know, hundreds of thousands on the road now. It happens. And right now we have Ampere in Hawthorne that is a great electric plane company. And I would say that in 7 years, you and I, Gia, we're gonna see regional air transport by electric air, where, you know, you and Ray want to go to Palm Springs and don't want to spend 5 hours in traffic. You could go to Hawthorne, take an Ampere over to Palm Springs in, you know, 45 minutes, zero emission. That's not unheard of. If I would have said in 1993 that there will be no diesel buses in 15 years, I would have been laughed out of the park, right? But there were no diesel buses at the MTA in Montebello and Culver and Santa Monica in the 15-year timeline. The same is true here. And yeah, it is great jobs. 500,000 just in California, but think about this, 5.5 million across the country go and work every morning in the renewable sector and the EV sector. And guess what? There's another shoe that falls here, because we can't meet this fully renewable portfolio standard by 2045 entirely with just electricity and electrons. We're going to be doing it with hydrogen. And hydrogen is a $2.5 trillion market. And there are companies like First Element Fuels that now have 30 hydrogen stations across Southern California. They just were given $52 million by the state of California's Energy Commission to do 40 more hydrogen fueling stations. And, you know, every OEM like Honda and Nissan and others have hydrogen fueled cars. And fuel cell technology, which is driven by hydrogen, which is driven by natural gas, renewable natural gas, is going to be a force that will add to our ability to get to 100% RPS. Well, guess what? Someone is going to have to build those stations, maintain those stations, do the network that will deliver the infrastructure for natural gas and hydrogen. And it's going to be folks from our communities, and we're going to have to go out and train them, fund them, and make sure that they are in the right place to get this done. But it's a huge, huge economic boon for low-income and diverse communities who are perfectly designed to help to bring this part of the economy up as part of the recovery. Remember, when we were in the last recession, the single biggest contributor to us coming out of the recovery as quickly as we did was President Obama's leadership in providing the tax credits for wind and solar and electric vehicles. And those are the areas that quickly created jobs and economic opportunity and helped to bring us out of the recession. More of that is to come, but we need a change in leadership to recognize the value of that change and the velocity that it needs to occur.
Wow. So tell us real quick, I could really talk to you all day. You're such a plethora of information, but
I know.
Black and brown communities, with this election coming up, off the top of your head, what do they need to know? What is on the ballot? What is important, particularly in California, but nationwide, that you know of that they really need to vote on? So those that are feeling, I don't know if I'm gonna vote, what is important right now on this ballot? And what specifically do you think that they need to know that they are voting on? We have the affirmative action. What else on the topic?
Well, listen, I think that there's a couple of initiatives. I can't remember the numbers, but we have the Prop 13 Reform Initiative, which will help to create billions of dollars more revenue. Instead of adjusting land assessment or property assessments for homeowners, it will do so for commercial building owners over a certain amount of value. And we need to access that in order to help to subsidize. Remember, the pandemic has taken California from a $26 billion reserve to what will become a $52 billion deficit. So we're going to have to drag ourselves out of that, and we will. We've innovated our way out of that before. We are the world's largest small business, a very resilient economy, and the 5th largest economy on the planet. But 80% of our business are employers of 100 employees or less. So it's very dynamic, and we need to give ourselves that opportunity. Probably the single biggest thing that one could do is to vote for Joe Biden, quite frankly. I've known and worked with him for 20 years. He is not only a man of great integrity and incredible stamina and endurance, but he also has a right plan for this country in terms of where we're going, not just for the contemporary issues like the recovery and the pandemic. It's much more global than that. This is probably the single biggest turn of events. This is the fork in the road for a fantastic future or more of the same. And there's nothing comparable, not even 9/11 or Pearl Harbor to me, that signifies the huge difference where our global stature and our global effectiveness needs to be rebuilt and reconstituted so that we can be back on the world stage as a leader and a voice and an innovator. We have lost that under this president, and Joe Biden can bring that back. In terms of climate change, there is no question. We have seen 4 million acres in California burn and be destroyed. It is larger than almost 2 states in New England. That's how much has burned and is now gone. And the economic value of that is tremendous. And we need to address climate change. And Joe Biden is willing to put $2 trillion into responding to climate change in the next 3 years. And it's going to take even more than that. But there's a lot of other issues that have to do with civil rights. When we have a president that tells neo-fascists and hate groups, stand by, stand ready, when we have young men, putting a Bushmaster in their truck and driving from Dallas to El Paso to go to a Walmart and hunt Mexicans because he thinks that Trump will like it. I mean, what world are we living in? This is the type of thing that needs to change. I don't want my son Jonah growing up in a world where that's blessed by our commander in chief. I don't want him to grow up in a world where he can't experience what a polar bear may be, or a sperm whale, or what a forest naturally should look like. We all, for our children and for the generations beyond us, have to understand that this point in history is a point where your children are going to ask, what did you do to fight climate change? What did you do to save the United States and make sure that I had a better life than what you had? These are questions I want to be able to say, I did everything I could, and then want to say, and we won, and we did it, and now look at what you have.
Where is the balance, Tom, between doing the right thing, making the right decision, and what's beneficial financially, right? I think a lot of people that are toggling the fence, they struggle with that. Like, where am I financially with my financial decisions? Because we know a lot of people make decisions with their wallet, but there's still that do good piece of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people that are still struggling with what they think is the right financial decision and what they think is morally the right decision. How do you balance that out? Because you seem to do it well. How do you?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's you know, it's a challenge. You know, you know, I'm in the midst of raising my fourth fund. Not a simple thing to do during a pandemic. You know, I have a payroll to meet. I have home and family expenses and so forth. It's not any different for me than it is, you know, most people. Praise God, none of us here on this phone call are part of the 40 to 50 million who are destitute. And I cannot move forward without knowing I'm doing something to help that problem and bring those folks along with us. And, you know, I have to convince myself that the fortune of my fund is the fortune for them, that the things that we invest in are going to create jobs and have meaningful economic development, which is, you know, living wage, quality of life, health insurance, so that we know they're taken care of. Maybe it's only a couple hundred throughout the portfolio, but it's a couple hundred more than would have had it. So, you know, my mission is to be successful so that I could pull along others that could feel secure for themselves and their families as well. That's a moral obligation I think any entrepreneur of note has to have and adopt as an ethic for operations. Without it, there's no moral standing that one would have with starting a business. You know, a business is not just in the interest of the individual who initiates it. It has to be in the interest of the community it serves, including the employees. So, you know, there's a considerable amount of weight that I feel. Thank you for acknowledging it, but yes, it is a challenge. And, you know, again, it's made more difficult with its tone and content of leadership that we have in the White House that, you know, clearly operates by a considerably different standard as a business leader too than I do, you know, paying taxes, stiffing subcontractors and so forth. That's not my idea of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
It's really bringing
I'm gonna
up
put
the
you on
community.
spot real quick and get your thoughts on law enforcement and what do you think is needed at this point?
You know, I have thoughts about that. You know, I was Gray Davis's appointee on the Board of Corrections for years. I was, you know, vice chair of the Board of Corrections, and our responsibility was to run all the debt that went to the county level to provide resources for jail facilities and the high standards that they're operated at, or at least implemented, you know, with the intent that they be operated. So, for example, I mean, we would send millions of dollars to the county of Los Angeles, county sheriffs, and Alameda and San Bernardino. You know, and I'm a booster for law enforcement. I'll just say it bluntly. But that doesn't mean, you know, we can't have and encourage much greater grassroots sensitivity training. When I was on the board, I think, well, first of all, when I was first on the board, I was the only one that didn't pack heat or carry a badge. And that was unusual. And I was, I think, the only Latino. I was certainly the only gay guy. And I was the one that basically asked the question, you know, how many of our, because our incarceration rates just go up and up and up. Our average daily was just incredible at the time. At the time, I think it was 186,000 or something like that. But to me, and having gone and toured a lot of these facilities, you can't help but notice that a lot of these folks are mental health offenders. And the question is, how do these people wind up in this vertical as opposed to social services? And so I was the one that said, okay, Mr. Debt Piece, you want that debt? Tell you what, you're going to commit a percentage of that debt instead of building more concrete and doors and beds. We want a percentage of that to go to Alameda, San Bernardino, LA County. And we want to pilot training police officers, like at the real grassroots level, the guys in a car who are called to go to the promenade because there's this kid acting out in a store. And within the first 3 minutes of that interaction, there are signals that that young person will give that a police officer should know this is not a violent offender. This is a mental health offender and is suffering from some, OCD, attention deficit, schizophrenia, and so forth. They're off their meds. And rather than put them in cuffs and in jail for violent behavior, maybe put them in cuffs in a holding cell until social services can get their file, and then they get them. And, so we did a survey and found that I think it was 20% of our inmates were mental health offenders. That should not be there. And so I'm a big supporter of the need for more resources like that. Don't tell me you can't do the same type of training to de-escalate a situation with somebody who has a bat. A gun may be different, right? But, with 2 or 3 officers around one person, there are ways of de-escalating something like that. And, my respect and support for, all of our brothers and sisters who are, with law enforcement at any level who are being disparaged at this point. That's not to say it's a hall pass or an excuse for a lot of the police abuse that seems to be occurring and is occurring. But we have to recognize that there's, a need for law enforcement, but there is just as much of a need for the type of training that's necessary to understand the communities that they serve, mostly, Latino and Black communities. And, I think that there is, it's not just isolated to one community or the other. I think all of our communities feel it, and it's much more of an economic question than just a racial question.
What do you think about that, Ms. Gia?
I agree. He's right. A lot of the population that's incarcerated a lot of it's mental health issues. And I said it every day when I go to work, when I'm because I deal with the mental health population that's incarcerated more so than the general population. And I always ask when I get called to have to deal with them, or I'm in meetings or I'm inside the modules with them, I'm always saying, how did this person get here? What did this person do to get arrested? Because obviously this person has a severe mental health issue. And that's the thing, there's no more hospitals like there used to be for that population. So, of course, a lot of times they're committing the crimes because some of them want a roof over their head. They want to be somewhere instead of being on the streets. Okay. Or sometimes they're on the streets, and what they're doing, they don't understand what they're doing. Things are in their head. They're talking to them and making them do things. And of course, us citizens, we call the police, that's the first thing we do is call 911, and we have to come deal with it. And you're right, police officers do need training in that, but also too, see, I didn't go to school for psychology. So, you can give me some training, but again, if it's in the classroom, how classroom training is, you get the lesson, then you leave. You don't really get good training until you actually dealing with this kind of stuff on a regular basis, kind of on the job training. I've learned more about mental health being a lieutenant right now inside the jail than I've ever known about mental health when I was working on the streets. Okay, so, and that's because I'm dealing with them more. I'm around them. So now when I'm not at work and I'm just in the streets, I can recognize when you see, that person's crazy, and stuff. It's not, I can say, oh yeah, that person, they have something going on. I'm seeing things that you probably wouldn't notice if you were with me, Tonya, because you're not seeing these people every day like I'm seeing them, and I can recognize the signs and symptoms and stuff like that. But you're right. Right now, it's a difficult time for us in law enforcement because we are being disparaged by all the other nonsense that's going on. But there's so many other aspects of law enforcement that the public doesn't realize that we do and we engage in every day that is positive, and we're trying to make a difference, in the community and stuff. But we just, again, it's just something about our psyche, the human nature. We get so fixated on the negative stuff. and we just keep that going and going and going. And, you know, for every negative story, there's also a positive story that's not getting highlighted.
I love it.
Well, thanks for your service, Gia. You know,
You're welcome.
keep at it. You know, it'll get better. You're right. It's a cycle.
Yeah, you know it is, and we've gone through it, and you know, that's the sad part. This has happened before, and here it is happening again, and it probably will continue to happen. And a lot of times, it's people see the uniform, and it's the uniform, but it's not necessarily the uniform. It's the people that get put in the uniform. Okay, that is a lot of the problem. You know, and how do you fix that? Ooh, you know, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
Well, Tom, we want to find out what you have coming up, what we can look out for from you, and how we can support anything that you have going on.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. You know, right now I have my fund, Diverse Communities Impact Fund, which is a lower middle market growth equity impact fund. And we basically invest in technologies that increase or improve the quality of life by increasing access to better healthcare, education, banking, financial services, and credit, and an improved environmental condition, all while generating alpha. If it's not generating profits, it's not generating an impact. And so we launched this fund last year. We're pretty near a first close, which is great. And, you know, we're moving forward with, you know, companies that we believe are changing the world, very similar to the type of investments I've made in the past. I'll continue to do so. And, you know, some of these investments include a blockchain nursing app that is helping to deploy nurses in real time in low-income diverse communities that otherwise wouldn't see them.
Oh, wow.
And that is doing an extraordinary scale. It's gone from 3 million last year to almost 100 million in revenue this year, all due to COVID. Our companies tend to have COVID tailwinds because they're all remote, they're all virtual. Virtual banking, Aspiration, where I'm senior advisor, is doing fantastic. You know, we have a number of companies in our portfolio dealing with hydrogen, electric air, and so forth. So, you know, there's tremendous opportunity with environmental innovation and sustainability in response to climate change. And I think with, you know, a Biden administration put accelerators on that whole sector, because I think it's only going to be even greater. You know, on my nonprofit side, I still sit on the board of the California Science Center as vice chair. That has been a challenge, obviously, during the pandemic as our doors have been shut. But we continue to raise money for our Phase 3 Air and Space Museum. I still sit on the board of the LA Dodgers Foundation. And, you know, our CEO, Nicole Whiteman, is just an incredible innovator and has not only kept the organization alive, but thriving, and continues to serve the communities. We continue to open up baseball diamonds in Montana and South LA and so forth. And it's just a great story. You know, I still sit on the board of the LA Clean Tech Incubator, where I'm a founder and a board member. And again, another robust and thriving leader in the climate change arena. Not that we have a lot of tenants going to the office every day, but they are actually out there doing what they should do, and that is growing and scaling and creating good economics for the people of California. And then continue as a voice for the New America Alliance, challenging institutional finance to bring more people of color and diversity into fund management. I mean, as of now, as much work as we've all done through the NAA and other organizations like NAIC and NASP and AIM, you know, people of color and women are still just about 2% of the $17 trillion of assets under management. So that is still an abysmal number that needs, you know, a huge boost to get to some level of parity. Let's call it 5%. But, you know, to be 2% is inexcusable. And so that's another battle that, you know, and struggle that I'm involved with. So, you know, those are the things. And then I have my beautiful family, 11-year-old. He's the reason why I get up in the morning and put up with all of this and want to move forward and make things better, because, as hard as it is for me to do this and I enjoy it, he's at the 6th grade on Zoom at the kitchen table from 8 to 3. I mean, how hard could that be? And then he's got his tutoring and, all the other challenges that an 11-year-old has. So, I mean, no one is left unscarred by this. And, they have to be, I call it our cross of gold at this point, because, we're all bearing something, but we all have to bear it and go into the future and pray and be confident and filled with courage that we're going to get through this, and we'll all be the better for it, just like we were after World War I, World War II, the 1960s. And, to this day, I have to look at our economy in California in particular, in our communities, and I look at our state legislature and what the Black and the Latino caucus have done to keep us moving forward, this governor. I look at our economy, and California is still the basket of innovation. I mean, we may have Silicon Valley and Silicon Beach, but we've got the Dodgers and the Rams and the Chargers and, so much stuff going on here.
The Lakers.
Right, the Lakers. and people around the world, they don't speak English. They speak Hollywood. They speak Google. They speak, all that we are. They look at us and say, that's what we want to be. And we are it. So, that is a great privilege to, begin to look at and say, wow, you know what? We can get through this. I mean, it's not just now. It's the genetics of who we are and what our families before us and our parents gave to us to accept these challenges and to move forward, and we will. And I look forward to that day, but I also look forward to getting up every morning and saying, okay, how are we going to make this better?
I appreciate that. Now, LinkedIn, I can always find you on LinkedIn. Where else are you hiding, Tom?
I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and I have my Instagram account. I don't maintain it that well, but I'm mostly on LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn.
All right.
Works for
me. Ms. Gia, what are you up to? What can we look forward to from you?
Right now, I'm not going to be up to too much of anything. I'm going to try to get some rest, but you can always find me on Instagram, The Mahogany Box, and on Facebook, The Mahogany Box. And that's about it.
We got to get Mr. Soto a new Mahogany Box water bottle or coffee cup. So
yes,
I might have to take it to him myself, but I actually want to hopefully get you back at some point so we can talk about money and finances in the Black and Brown communities, Tom.
Anytime, when I'm here for you.
In that we need to broach and have in a very serious way so that they can understand how to really start building generational wealth, even starting from nothing. And I think you have a lot of insight on that, and we want to explore that. So
well, happy to do so. Just let me know.
Thank you. And for me, you guys know I hide out in my Lady Boss groups for the most part, or working with clients. We have a sponsorship seminar coming up in the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to be doing something else with A Child's Memories of Cartoons and Murder. I think I'm going to do my 6 lessons on how you laugh at trauma. Like, people are having a hard time right now getting through some things that have been holding them back, right? And right. I tend to make light of things, finding opportunities to almost laugh at them. But, people are like, well, how can you laugh at that? I'm going to show you how. Because if we get stuck and we find ourselves with roadblocks, we got to find our way out of that. And sometimes laughter is a little therapeutic. So I'm going to walk them through that. So if you guys haven't checked out Child's Memories of Cartoons and Murder, the Facebook page, it'll also be posted on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. But definitely anybody that's struggling with trauma or moving past roadblocks, I'm going to get into that because I've been seeing a lot of that. And especially for my lady friends, I don't like that hindering their growth or hindering their finances or hindering their ability to grow their business and things of that nature. And you know me, I just like to laugh. So with that being said, I want to thank Tom for spending the time with us to really get us engaged in what is at stake right now, environmentally, business-wise, corporate, all that good stuff. I don't see Gia silent too often, and she's over there taking notes and really keyed in on some of the things that he was saying. I was like, I'll keep him talking because she's locked and loaded right now.
Well, you know, it's funny, Tonya, because you know you always get on me, and I got all the emails that Tom sent us and all his LinkedIn stuff, and I actually was up late last night. And I was reading this stuff, and I have wrote stuff down.
Wow.
Okay, and so I'm like, okay, so you know, Tom, I got like maybe 4 or 5 LinkedIn's. I don't even remember how to log into any of them. So, and Tanya's her and Ray, they get on me about my LinkedIn account. So after I was reading all your stuff, I was like, okay, this dude has a lot going on. He's been doing some really good stuff, and I'm intrigued. So I'm gonna figure out how to log into one of my LinkedIn accounts and get it going so I can read some more stuff from you.
Well, thanks for the time. It was very, very enjoyable, and Gia, stick with it. Don't let it get you down, kid. You know, it's just my mother used to say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And, folks like us feel that, right? And, but that never stopped her from, spent the last 10 years in the state legislature, and she retired in December of, 2009. And one day she said, I want to just go home with your daddy. And, in 3 months, she went to heaven. And she knew what her mission was, and she was never willing to ever give up on it. So neither am I. It sounds like you're the part of the same spirit. So we'll go through this together, and maybe in a couple years or next year we could toast it and laugh about it, Tonya, as part of our path.
I'm waiting that long. We're going together on November 4th to celebrate, right?
Exactly.
Hold you to it.
Right.
Well, thank you guys. Have a good Monday,
you.
and we will we'll see you next week.
Happy Monday. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.